The theme of this year's forum is Winning the 21st Century, Allied Strength and Solidarity. We chose this theme with great care because it offers context and purpose to every one of us gathered here today. 7 decades ago, on a winter night in Moscow, an American diplomat dispatched a secret 8,000-word telegram, a long telegram, back to Washington. That American was a founding father of modern grand strategy, George F. Kennan. His telegram was a warning. As the Iron Curtain was descending across Europe, Kennan alerted Washington to the Kremlin's dangerous ambitions, most especially of its plans to deepen and exploit the differences between Western powers. Kennan was witnessing the beginning of the Cold War, and he was laying down the foundations for how we should fight it. In issuing that famous telegram, George Kennan was not a fortune teller. He was a keen observer who drew upon years of experience, insight, and first-hand knowledge of the East. It is a tradition that we continue to uphold to this day at CEPA. Yet even as Moscow was claiming half of Europe for its own, Kennan counseled that the government of the Soviet Union did not represent the natural outlook of the Russian people. Rather, the Russian people were eager above all to live in peace and enjoy the fruits of their own labor. Their government was the problem. As the Kremlin plunged the world into the Cold War, Kennan raised the storm flags. He warned Washington that Moscow was using populist groups and global tension as instruments of power, and he called upon Western societies to educate their populations about this threat. Kennan's counsel is still relevant today. The Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of Soviet power and the start of a new peace. The peace of 1991 was one of the great victories of the 20th century, equal in scale to the defeat of fascism in 1945. In both instances, Western values had triumphed over the enslavement of others. Many of the countries represented here at our forum today were freed because of the peace of 1991. Once free, the formerly captive nations of Central and Eastern Europe sought common security guarantees from the United States and from their neighbors. They disavowed any wish to capture, control, or disrupt neighboring territories. Russia made these promises too. Unfortunately today, in Georgia and in Ukraine, Russia has broken its promises. And we are here today at 9 o'clock in the morning because our Atlantic world is not at peace. It is our task as Americans and Europeans to reestablish and protect that peace. At last year's forum, CEPA laid out a vision for what this may entail, for hardening our societies against state-sponsored propaganda, for ensuring that the bonds between the United States and Europe are unbreakable and remain so, and for finally establishing the permanent presence of US forces east of Berlin. 1 year has passed, and today there are voices who say that such thinking echoes too much of the Cold War, or that we risk being too provocative of our adversaries in protecting ourselves and our most loyal allies. To accept this notion, as some well-meaning people have, is to ignore the counsel of another wise man from the Cold War, Dean Acheson, who reminds us that no people in history have ever survived who thought they could protect their freedom by making themselves inoffensive to their enemies. The broken peace of 1991 is not only a danger to frontline allies. Without peace, our freedom, our institutions, and our way of life are at risk. Today, everyone is a frontline state. America is a frontline state. And we should have no doubt the Russian government is an adversary so long as it is breaking the peace. Vladimir Putin poses a risk to the United States and his neighbors. He believes that might makes right, and he can see endless opportunities to create chaos and disorder in the West for strategic effect. While Russia also faces challenges, Putin seems to be wagering that the side which can cope best with disorder in the 21st century will win. Putin may be tempted into thinking that his top-down authoritarian system can manage chaos better than the pluralistic, open societies of the West. Americans and Europeans together, we are the West, and Vladimir Putin is wrong. His system is not stronger than ours, but it now falls to us to prove that fact, and we can. The military strength and cohesion of our Atlantic alliance is our first, finest, and best defense. But armies alone are insufficient to protect ourselves. We also need to be vigilant in eliminating the pipelines of influence that pollute our political discourse. Corruption is a weapon. Russia's banks are just as dangerous as Russia's tanks. And while the domains of the battlefield may be changing, these things remain true. Allies matter. Our covenants with each other can never be broken, and we can protect ourselves by strengthening both. This is why CEPA and the CEPA Forum exist, to tackle the big problems, to think outside of traditional status quo boundaries, and to find practical solutions. For our discussions at today's forum, we will consider how best to organize our collective security priorities to bolster our defenses. We'll identify concrete actions to counter the hybrid threats we face, and we will assess the role that energy security plays in strengthening the ties that bind allies together. By tackling these complex issues, we build trust. Trust emboldens allies to rely upon each other and to rally round in a time of need. This is the basis of our Atlantic solidarity. This is what makes us stronger than our adversaries, and this is how we will restore the peace